we're already hearing a lot of speculation because first up, Pierre LeBrun on Insider Trading talked about how there's still a chance Freddie Andersen stays in Toronto. So Andersen's agent spoke with management, and the question they got was, is Andersen interested in potentially resigning and staying put? And the answer that they got was yes. So I'm just curious, Alex, let's just start this off. What is a reasonable contract to re-sign him at? Cap hit, term, what are you thinking?
Well, that's a really, really tough question, in my opinion, because if last season taught us anything, it showed us that Jack Campbell, as it stands right now, has taken the crease from Freddie Andersen. And I have no doubt that the Freddie Andersen that we saw last year is not the Freddie Andersen that we're going to see every year. I think he's had a couple of rough seasons in a row, but we've all seen what he's capable of when he's at the top of his game. And I have faith that he can get back to that point. But the problem that I have with bringing back Freddie Andersen, first of all, actually, I should probably answer your question. If I were to plan out a contract for Freddie, I think the only condition that you would have to put down for fans not to go after Kyle Dubas's head, he would have to sign for less than what he was making on his last contract.
Oh, that's a given. It'd have to be the pay cut.
100%. And so if I were to bring him back, I wouldn't go any higher than $3 million a year. I would probably say that's probably the max that I would do. And the reason I say that is because the Leafs have $10 million in cap space to work with right now. And on top of having to deal with Freddie Andersen's potential want to return, they've also got to worry about potentially finding a replacement for Zach Hyman, because there's increasing speculation, and again, all speculation, nothing confirmed yet, but based on the kind of what's going on around the media and what's going on around the hockey mecca of the world, it sounds like Zach Hyman is looking more like he's going to test the open market rather than re-sign with the Leafs. And if he leaves, that's a big blow for Toronto. So they've got to also worry about replacing him because he's a top six winger. And on top of that, if Jack Campbell can prove that he can be a good starting goalie next year, you could get a competent backup goalie, someone along the lines of a Chris Drieger or even like a Darcy Kemper, someone like that to fill in the backup goalie position, or at least play a 1B role. And you could probably get them at a much cheaper price than you could get Andersen. So I know that obviously Freddie Andersen is well liked among his teammates, and I'm sure that the Leafs would love to see him back, but I don't know what the price would be. Because like I said, you've got multiple areas to worry about this offseason, and I think there's truthfully a bigger needs than addressing that 1B slot in the crease.
No, I definitely agree with you there. And I mean, we're talking about Freddie, we're talking about NHL GMs here, right? Like, I have a hard time believing somebody isn't going to pay him on reputation at a $5 million rate or even more. Like, look at what Sergei Bobrovsky's making. And, it's arguable that Andersen, at least as of now, is still even better than what Bobrovsky's providing for the Florida Panthers. And I think it's reasonable to expect somebody will pay him starting money and play him as a starter. Now, he's heading towards the thing about goalies is it's interesting because some of them do play better as they get older. It's tough to know what Freddie's going to be like in the next 5 years, if he'll continue to maybe even improve somewhat, or if he's just going to go completely down the drain. That's kind of the risk you would be taking in this position. But there's a lot of options here for the Leafs, and this kind of leads into my last question on the topic. Should the Leafs look elsewhere, whether it's via free agency or trade? And basically, has the Andersen era in Toronto passed its course?
Again, that's a tough question. That's a good question, and it's a tough one to answer because, like I said, it all comes down to what Freddie Andersen will demand and how much Kyle Dubas is willing to spend on him and how long he's willing to sign him for. Because I think the other variable that we got to take into consideration here is, what if Jack Campbell comes out next season and he plays just as good as he played down the stretch in 2020, 2021, and all of a sudden his contract is up too, and you got to look at bringing him back. So, I mean, obviously having two great goalies is a great problem to have. I don't think anybody's denying that, but it just, again, for me, it all comes down to how much Dubas is willing to spend on his second goalie and how much he's willing to commit to addressing other areas. It's really hard to say. If there is a situation out there where Freddie Andersen would want to return on like a 1-year contract at $2 million a year. I know that's a very, very far cry, but if Freddie Andersen showed that he really, truly just wanted to be in Toronto and he wanted to be back with his teammates again, he wanted a better shot to prove to teams that he can be the Freddie Andersen that he was in 2017 and 2018, then I could see them bringing him back. But like you said, it's hard to believe that there's not other teams out there that would give him upwards of $5 million a year because of what he's done. And we've seen that come into play in free agency. We've seen that in years past. So if there's a team that's kind of on the cusp of contending and they've got the cap space to work with and they need a good starting goalie, I can't think of a team off the top of my head. But if there's a team like that, who knows? That might be a little more of an appealing offer for Freddie, especially if he can guarantee himself upwards of 50 starts a season. So.
Well, yeah, there's an argument to be made like that he could potentially sign a 1-year deal at a lower cap hit to maybe try to provide himself an opportunity to make a lot more in the open market next year. But even looking at players that have done that in years past, like a Taylor Hall or Kevin LeBanc, that hasn't exactly worked out for them. Like there's no way Taylor Hall's making more than $8 million on the open market. No. Kevin LeBanc ended up screwing himself by not taking whatever longer term deal maybe he could have gotten offered there. That generally doesn't seem to really work that well for the player. And I have to imagine Andersen would probably wants a little bit more security, but it's at least nice to know that there is a potential for him to come back. Cause I mean, it does kind of suck, that it's kind of ended off like this. Like
totally.
He was the backbone of this team, of this next generation of players. And there were troubles during the playoffs, but I just wish it could have ended off better. Maybe there's another chapter to the story.
I agree. I mean, I started watching hockey in 2005, and Freddie Andersen was the first actual good goalie I got the opportunity to witness in Toronto. And when I say an actual good goalie, I mean a guy that you can turn to for 60 games out of the year to maybe not a Vezina contender, but a guy that can give you 60 good games and you can be reliable down the stretch as well. I mean, that he's the first option I've seen. I mean, the first goalie I ever watched was Andrew Raycroft, and we all know how that ended up. So yeah, I'm a big Freddie Andersen fan. I know I hate rooting against. I don't root against him. I hate that we're having this conversation because in a perfect world, he'd be the same Freddie Andersen as he was 4 years ago. But yeah, it's going to be a tough decision to make. And regardless of what happens, I wish nothing but the best for him.
Hello, Leafs fans, and welcome to the Babbling Buds Podcast, hosted by Jordan Jacklin.